This is the magicwordpodcast.com.
While we're on the subject of ghost tours, I thought it would be interesting to revisit someone that we had in an episode several years ago, and that's my friend Paul Prater, who gives ghost tours up in a place just north a little bit of Little Rock, Arkansas. And some of you might be interested in conducting your own ghost tours. Whether or not the place is haunted, you probably can make up your own story and try to haunt a place. So please welcome my guest, Mr. Paul Prater. Hey there, Paul.
Hey, Scott, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
You bet. You have so much knowledge about this, and you do a lot of shows and bizarre type of things, and you have a great presentations that you give in your shows. And but you bring that all to bear when you do these ghost tours, and it's not just during the month of October. This is something that you do year round, much like Vince Wilson does with the Poe tours. But you do this year round also. Is that correct?
Yeah, what I do is they run for the public during season, but anytime anyone calls and wants a tour, yep, I'll go do them.
So how do they find you then? Let's go back to the basics about how do you market that?
Sure. So the way I'm found is primarily through my website. I've just got a good solid website, and SEO is always an ever-changing thing, but if you type in haunted attractions, ghost tours, any of that, Arkansas, I pop up right at the top. So it's typically out-of-town people who are traveling in, and they Google that, and there I am. Now, during the holiday season, television, radio, Facebook ads. I've even had a radio station last year. People came to the tour, and they replayed an interview we had done 2 years prior.
Wow.
So yeah, I was pretty surprised to hear that, because they said, we heard you on the radio this morning. And I said, I wasn't on the radio this morning.
But it was interesting enough, and I guess timely enough, that they could present that again. There's something in that perhaps that people may not realize, that if you don't have something that is of the moment, in other words, you're trying to promote something that's only like for this weekend, you better be there, I'm going to be. But if you make this that's more generic, they can plug and play that time after time and year after year, I guess.
Right. Because I always run them heavily during September. Yeah, we start at the end of September and run through mid-November, and I plug them pretty hard and have really good turnouts during the season. I have found I've tried to run like regular Christmas time tours, and there just was not enough turnout to make it worth it for me. So that's why I just started doing them as if you want a tour, let me know and I'll give them, but I don't market them in the off season. Plus, I mean, being in Houston, it's too damn hot to run ghost tours most of the year.
Yep.
Out there sweating everywhere.
Even in the evenings. That's right. It cools off to about 85,
Right.
So yeah. And plus humidity.
Humidity.
Right. Exactly. And what, another thing is that what we would do is we would promote this also to meetup groups. There are organizations who have clubs, or they're looking for things to do with their
organization
that might be interested in seeking out these things. So that's another group that you can find. Just Google some of these psychic meetup groups, or spook meetup groups, or haunted or gothic or whatever it is. I guess there are certain keywords you can find.
Yeah, and you can do that with your Facebook marketing too, and that's what I do. I select the person's interest to market to. I don't have it just wide open, and of course that's just one aspect or avenue of my marketing. I know that could exclude some people from seeing it, but again, with radio, with television, with all of that, I feel like I get pretty good coverage, and I've been lucky that I have really good numbers on ghost tours, and we're not a tourist town, so they are locals that are turning out by and large during the Halloween season.
I would imagine that's true. In Little Rock, most people would be coming there for the therapeutic waters, I guess. And
right.
Whatnot. Yeah.
And that's an hour away from me. So that's in Hot Springs. So yeah. I do ask though, everybody who comes on the tour, I ask every single person, how did you hear about this? So that way I get good feedback. I get a lot of, I don't know. Now at this point, I get a lot of, well, so-and-so told me about it. Facebook though is still the number one answer. They're like, I don't even know how I saw it. I just saw it on Facebook. Wow. Well, I know how they saw it. It's because I boosted my event so it doesn't look like an ad, and they saw the event pop up. That's how they got it.
Oh, so it's boosting, not advertising necessarily. Because I know I get those things also. It says, do you want to boost this event? And it actually works. I've not used that before, but interesting.
It does, because it doesn't look like advertising. It just looks like, I mean, it is something they would be interested in, because I boost it to people who are interested in haunted attractions, ghost tours, ghost hunting, Halloween. So they are interested in it.
So you can identify what groups this would be boosted to, I guess. Is that right?
Yeah, you get to choose what kind of special interest. So that's how I do my marketing. So it's not just a wide open blast of everybody out there. It's focused on people who at least have an interest in this stuff. And I do it within, I think, 85 miles of Little Rock.
That's interesting. Okay. So the way that they have their analytics, they, I guess, would send that around to just a targeted area. They could do that too.
That's correct.
Huh, interesting.
You can limit your region and your special interest. So I always do that. And I do, you can even select how what percentage of you want men versus women to see it, for instance. And I found that most of the people who click through on wide open campaigns are women. So I heavily skew it towards women as well.
Mm-hmm. Good to know. Well, let me go back to the, I guess, very beginning, as far as trying to start a ghost tour. To begin with, how did you find the place, and what, how'd you go about that, and then the stories and all that?
Sure. I want to give a little shout out to Ed Underwood. He's a magician as well, and started ghost tours in Jonesboro, Arkansas. And he called me when he was moving and asked me to take over. So as far as learning how to do a ghost tour, I give Ed a whole lot of credit. But to answer your question specifically, North Little Rock, that's Argenta, that's my area. So I came up with that ghost tour. What I did, I was sitting on the back patio of a business down there with a friend of mine who owns a wine bar. And he goes, people say there's a ghost up there, and points at a window. And it hit me. If there's one ghost, there's got to be more, right?
Gotta have friends, right?
So I actually we have a historical commission right there in Argenta. That's the name for our old downtown North Little Rock, is Argenta. That was the original name of the city. So I went down there and told him what I wanted to do, and asked the historian if he had ghost stories. And I guess to a certain extent, I was real lucky. He opened a folder he had kept of ghost stories in Argenta. And then, being the history commission, they had all of the pictures I could ever want. And they were very open about sharing those with me. But then, to really fill it out, I also went to each of the places, each of those businesses. And I think this is key if you're going to do a ghost tour. I went to each of the businesses, asked them if they were okay with me talking about their business, which, most people are like, yeah, free marketing. But some people are weird about ghost stories and haunted stuff, And then I asked them what were their experiences. I got stories from business owners about stuff that happened. Those were where most of my stories came from, were actually the business owners or employees who had experienced things in that building. And then finally, you can go to, I think it's newspapers.com, and buy a subscription, and you have access, searchable newspaper articles. You can do a search term. So I did murder, suicide, anything I could think of, and put in the terms North Little Rock, Argenta, the river, found tons of stories. So between those three methods, I've got pretty much two separate tours, an hour-and-a-half one and a 2-hour tour. And most of the stories don't even cross over.
Wow.
There were that many. And this is I'm talking 5 blocks. This isn't a huge area.
So I was going to say, that's another thing. Whenever that you're going out for a walk, there are some people, let's say older people, who may not want to walk as far, or children. I assume obviously you have an age minimum for where you let kids, but you don't encourage it.
Exactly. What I say is, there's stories about murder, prostitution, suicide. Your kid. I'm not the gatekeeper. You choose if you want to bring your kid, but I don't alter my tour for your kid, which is not entirely true. I tone down the language if there's a kid there. Not that I'm dropping F-bombs or anything, but
Sure.
I use euphemisms to refer to prostitutes instead of calling them prostitutes, just stuff like that. I don't change the stories though.
Right. But as far as getting to walk around, it's an easy walk. And I assume, again, before you get started, you're telling people, okay, for those of you who are worried about this, we're only going to be walking for about 5 blocks. It's going to take what, an hour and a half, or how long do you typically do this?
Yeah, the typical ghost tours, and I do 2 different tours. One is the standard just walking ghost tour, and that's an hour and a half. And then I do one called Booze and Brews, where we actually go into the bars and I do some performance in 2 bars, and that one's 2 hours just because of the bar time. But yeah, it's very clear. It's all in all caps on the website. This is a walking tour. Wear comfortable clothes and shoes. And I do have a fair number of people who ask, how far do I have to walk? And when I tell them it's 5 blocks, that's it. And we're stopping 5 blocks in an hour and a half. You're not walking at a brisk pace. There's plenty of
that's true.
rest time.
About how many people do you cap it, or is there usually about 15, 12 people, or what?
No, I cap them at 25.
25. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I found that's as many as I can get. I don't want to wear a microphone around my neck. I don't I think part of being a responsible ghost tour operator is not bothering people. If they're not on the tour, they don't want to hear my mic blaring out
Across the street. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So 25, I can get around me in like a semicircle and everyone can hear. And with a semicircle, I constantly encourage them, get around me in a semicircle, because we're more compact that way too. So we're not blocking the sidewalks.
I assume you have some people who are walk-ups and they're walking by and they kind of see you as this group and they say, well, it's kind of interesting. And they try to join your group. And do you say, hey, this is a private group, or do you allow them to join you, or what?
That's an excellent question. So if somebody pops up while I'm in the middle of the story, I'm not going to chastise them or anything else. I finish the story. I let them hear whatever that story is. And then I go, hey, these are the Haunted Argenta Ghost Tours, or now it's Haunted Arkansas Ghost Tours. I've got flyers. I'll hand them a flyer and say, we run every night, come and check us out.
Mm-hmm.
So that way
the whole tour.
Yeah, that way it's a respectful, but they get the point then when I'm like, this is a paid tour and we'd love to see you here, but
That's a nice way of handling that, for sure. You were mentioning earlier about some of the businesses that may not want you to talk about the spook stories in and around their establishment. And I recall when Jamie Salinas and I were trying to find a location for our seances that we were doing, there was a place here in Houston called the Rice Hotel, which was known also for some of the spook stories. It's on the haunted register as well, but they are really trying to downplay that. And one of the reasons is because it's now a condominium and they don't want their people who are the guests or owners to bail out of the contract and say, hey, you never told us this was haunted. Things have gone wrong. Our pipes broke and it's because of the spooks, and, you owe us, and we, whatever. So right. It's like, we don't want anything to do with that. So.
Right. We've got a beautiful hotel in downtown Little Rock that would be incredible for that kind of stuff. And that was their deal. They're like, absolutely not. We're not talking about this stuff. We're not having any of this in our hotel. And I'm like, man, missing out.
Missing an opportunity there. That's true. Right. I know, and others just do the opposite. They will just really embrace it completely. Let's say like a Stanley Hotel right. there, in Colorado or something. You were talking right. about the photos and things that you have. Do you bring those along like in an album and show the people on the tour and say, look, this is a picture of so-and-so?
I do. And this is something I learned from Ed too, that I give him credit for, that I think's pretty brilliant. I mean, I guess nowadays you can probably do it on an iPad as well. But there's something I like about flipping those pages. Yeah, it's a 3-ring binder, and you just it's got a long flap. You Velcro it on the other side, so you just slide your arm through it, and you can flip through the pictures. And the other thing that's great about it is, for instance, I'm terrible with numbers, and obviously history dates are important. I'm terrible with numbers though. So when I flip this thing over and they're looking at a picture on the backside, I've got my dates and a basic bullet point of the facts of the story. So that way I don't have to try to remember everything. Of course, at this point now, I've got pretty much everything down except for when I add a new story in. But yeah, that way they have something to see that's visual. But I also got 2 videos from one of the venues we go into that are really completely unexplainable. Some weird stuff going on. And when I do the booze and brews, of course, people are at the bar. Some people are upstairs. So as people come upstairs for where we're doing the seance, I show the videos. So that way it's not just dead time, and they get something a little extra that the other places don't. And it is just on an iPad. I show the videos of what happened right there in that place.
Oh, that's a good idea too. Yeah, with the iPad. But I like the idea where that you actually have part of your script that you're seeing on the back right. when you flip the thing over like that. That's a clever idea then too. As far as the stories, I'm sure as people are on this tour, many times will offer you stories and say, well, I heard about such and such. Is that true? And it's like, well, it will be next week.
That's right. I have had several of those stories, and I've incorporated them into the shows, and I let people know it's true. On the very first tour I did, I got 2 great stories from people who used to work in one of the haunted locations with their experiences of what happened in there. Mm-hmm. And I always say, that's awesome. Can I share that on future tours? Everyone, of course, says yes.
Right.
And so you're absolutely right. I've gotten more stories from people on the tours as well who worked in these places or experienced these places, because again, a lot of my attendees are locals.
I don't think it would take too much research for anybody living anywhere in the world, basically, where you can find some stories about something that had happened in or around your area that you could build upon and tell a story. Even if something had happened miles away, you could still refer to that because it was nearby. But
I completely agree with that.
Or it could even be, as I mentioned at the beginning of this, about how you can even make up a story, because there was a book by Richard Wiseman in which he was talking about one of the chapters about he had created a story at a bar in a harbor someplace in England about some sea captain or something, and he was a spirit, and he kept coming back to this bar and telling these stories, and before long the stories took legs, and they were able then to build upon this, which there was nothing to begin with, but after he told it so many times, it became real. And then other people said, yeah, I've seen this guy, or I remember he had a pirate that traveled with him or something, or, that just kind of adds on to the whole thing. So there's a possibility of other stories that can be made. So if you actually tell a story, you have to be based in history. And I think it's important, like if there is some tragedy or something out of that you can perhaps build a story around the tragedy. Let me also point out, I think it's important that if you are going that route, it needs to be something that will have been more than a generation ago, specifically probably more than 100 years ago. You don't want to do something that is still an open wound in some people's lives who have family who may have been involved with that, and they don't want to hear about or talk about, or they might know details that you're trying to flesh out that is complete BS. So it's important, I think, that you would have a separation of time of something that had happened that people probably don't know about. You know what I mean?
I agree, because there would be a story that would be great for the tour, but that's exactly the situation. Something that occurred about 15 years ago, and that's no way.
Right.
I know some of the people who were involved around that. I'm being vague intentionally, but people who were, and I certainly would not want to offend them. So yeah, I totally agree with you. It needs to be way in the past.
Right. And in doing this, you have a rain or shine, I guess a rain check kind of a policy, or what do you do?
Yeah, what I say is that unless it's going to be absolutely miserable for everyone involved, we go. The good thing is, because it's all kind of downtown area, there's plenty of awnings, and big awnings, because they're old buildings. So they have those awnings that wrap around the building that are blocks long. So there's very little time where we have to be actually in the rain. Mostly it's just a 2-block walk. That's about it. And the whole rest of the time they're awnings. And I tell people, bring umbrellas or ponchos. I mean, I'm in it too. Now, if it was absolutely just howling wind and, rain blowing sideways, which has happened occasionally, I will cancel. I'll either give refunds or accommodate them, move them to a different date, or run an extra tour.
One other thing, do you have jump scares? Do you have companions or people behind a trash can or something?
I don't. And I make that clear from the get-go that I don't do that. But the funny thing is, while I don't do that, it happens fairly frequently. I mean, this is an area where people know who I am. I mean, when I'm doing ghost tours, I get people yelling out the car door at us because they know, like I say, it's an area where I spend a lot of my time when I'm not doing ghost tours. There's lots of restaurants and bars, and it's just my area. It's where I live, So there are plenty of people who will, come up behind a group and yell boo at them. It's not me though. And I tell that at the very start. I say, this isn't a haunted house. No one's going to jump out and yell boo. Said, if that happens and you're angry, I had nothing to do with it. If you loved it, I'll claim all the credit.
Good way of putting that. I mentioned that because there was a tour I had gone on in Ireland, I believe it was, and they were taking us down this particular alley after they had been talking about the Jekyll and Hyde. We'd gone to the Jekyll and Hyde bar, and then we were going around anyhow, I remember someone jumping out from behind a trash can that was in costume from back at that period, and my wife just about fell to her knees screaming. I've never seen her react like that from before.
I'll tell you, the best thing that I ever got as a reaction, I was telling this story, we're at the back. Usually the path we're on is very well lit, but we were at the back side of the buildings off Main Street, and it's dark back there. And I'm telling the story about how a guy committed suicide at the base of the stairwell, and the wind stirs up and a plastic bag came out of that stairwell. And man, people screamed as if I had done something. And it was just the wind stirred up a plastic bag. So
the right moment, the right time. Yeah,
that's right.
Exactly. Well, any other tips or ideas or suggestions as we close here as to for people who might be interested in trying to start their own ghost tour?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the number one thing that people need to be aware of is think about your walking, where you're going to walk, make it a good path that's walkable. Think about parking, where people are going to park, and just make sure that the city is cool with it. Getting buy-in from the city and business owners, I think, is really key, because then they start supporting you and backing you instead of fighting you.
That's a good idea. And also maybe align with the Convention and Tourism Bureau, so that way they know about you as well. What about insurance?
I don't have insurance, and the simple reason is this. We are walking on public streets, on city streets. They can try to sue me, but if somebody falls and hurts themselves, I'm also an attorney. So I'm not quite as worried about that. But if they fall and trip and hurt themselves, I mean, it's not my venue, it's not my area, and I'm not giving that as legal advice. I'm just answering your question as for me personally.
Right.
There are a lot of ghost tour guides who have insurance, but I think somebody would be hard pressed to be successful in a lawsuit. Anyone can sue you for anything, and you're going to have to hire an attorney. But I am one, so I'm not quite as worried about it.
There we go. And for people, again, who want to take a look at the website, where can they go to find you, or what your website looks like?
Yeah, it's hauntedarkansastours.com. So if they go there, they can find everything, and they can look at, I've got a pretty thorough fact there that covers a lot of questions that you ask. So people can kind of look at that, see how I've got things structured. I feel like it lays most of the things out. And part of that is because I get tired of, calls and questions about the same things over and over again. So I try to put everything on the fact to handle it, but you still get the calls and questions.
You still get calls, indeed. Well, thank you for taking this call and for filling us in on some of the details then as well. That's great. And good luck with and continued success. How many years have you been doing this?
This will be the 6th year now.
Okay.
So it's done really well. COVID years accepted, of course.
Exactly. Well, Paul Prater, thank you again for being my guest.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate you.
You
Talk
bet.
soon.
Okay, so the next time, that was Paul Prater. Scotty out.